y'all, welcome back. This is gonna be a fun one and probably a long one because today we are talking about Twilight. I finally went on the journey to see what the hype was about. I watched the movies and found myself slightly obsessed, read the books, and then worked my way back through most of the movies, all in approximately a 3-week span. So, before I go any further, no matter what gets said about Twilight in this video, let it be known that I've had a lot of fun and I do kind of see what the hype is about. That said, the storyteller side of my brain has a lot of notes. That is what we're talking about today. In this video, I want to talk about the books specifically, because I feel like you can always learn something from a book, even a book that's maybe lacking some important components. And I definitely came away from this series with some reinforced do's and don'ts that I want to take into my own writing. And even though you guys know my fears about book reviews, I figure since this saga is so well known and at this point so old, I don't mind putting in my 2 cents. I'm sure I'm not saying anything new. Right off the top, I want to tentatively put on the record, I think I prefer the films to the books. The main reason is that I think the movies present the characters in a more flattering light than the books do, and I think the movies attempt to solve some of the problems in the books. Let's talk about Bella first. While I was working my way through the fabulously cringy but entertaining films, I found myself laughing a lot, but also found that I liked Bella. Like, I didn't really have a problem with her. The way she was played, she exuded a kind of like quiet strength. Then I read the books, and it's all just her internal monologue, and realized this character is completely passive. She contributes really nothing physically to the plot. She is constantly allowing the people around her to make decisions for her own good, and never questioning their right to do so, and also just like, she's frighteningly dependent on the male love interest. All of that contributed to make me feel like, you know what? The books don't actually do Bella any favors. It taught me a couple things. 1, the importance of an active character versus a passive character. 2, it was a reminder for me, as someone who's currently writing romance, that romance is nice, but it can't be the only thing that is important to the character. Like, it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly in these books that that is the only thing that drives Bella. All her goals, desires, motivations, fears, everything. Her identity is wrapped up in Edward, which is extremely unhealthy, but also super one-dimensional. So it was a reminder that, like, yes, even in a romance story, it can be too much. That a character needs to have investment in some other things, or she's just going to feel completely flat. And really, the whole book is going to feel like it doesn't really have much depth or substance to it. And yes, I'll put it out there, I am Team Jacob. But that was mostly because while reading through the first Twilight book, I just found Edward to be so domineering and manipulative that his relationship with Bella just seemed incredibly toxic. And that's not to say that Jacob doesn't have his toxic moments, because, like, goodness, he does. But I felt like, weirdly, when Jacob's character was being toxic in the books, everyone was sort of aware of it, like it was overt. Whereas when Edward's being toxic, Bella just gives him a pass, and we're supposed to also give him a pass, which just felt more insidious to me. What else did I notice in the books? Dialogue. The Twilight books have a ton of dialogue, which is great, but I did feel like the dialogue was maybe a bit overwritten. Dialogue in books and movies, it doesn't function like dialogue in real life. In real life, we talk too much. We talk in circles, fill our conversations with a ton of just fluff that's not really saying anything, and that's sort of how a lot of conversations in Twilight started to feel to me. Even when you'd come across a line that was actually like really solid, and there were some where I was like, okay, that actually said something, like that got to the heart of something. Instead of letting those lines sort of sing, the author would often like overwrite and clutter up those moments, so the line just kind of got lost. Versus the films where, because they have to be so much more selective, you had those stronger lines from the book being able to just sort of hang there, more room for gaps for the viewer to kind of fill in the blanks themselves. It was a reminder that you don't need to spell everything out for the reader, that they can kind of get there on their own. So let your more impactful dialogue sing, and limit your dialogue to only what is impactful, as much as possible anyway. So less is more. And the same thing goes for gestures. Like, there's a part in Breaking Dawn, the book, where Jacob is talking to Edward, and Edward is in anguish about something because he's Edward and that's what he does. And there's a point where Edward ends up on the ground with his face in the dirt talking to Jacob. And I'm reading this thinking, in what universe is there a natural way for a man to lower himself to the ground, put his face in the dirt, presumably his butt in the air, and proceed with a conversation that way? Like, it's just, that's not natural. It's uncomfortable to even visualize. It's just so over the top. But guys, like, guilty. Like, looking back at some of my first sort of attempts at my fantasy project, I mean, I had guys crying all over the place. People were always yelling, majorly overblown emotional reactions to things. And I realize now that I was trying so hard to convey, like, this is an emotional moment, that I overdid it. Because the fact is, you can convey so much deep emotion in the most subtle ways, and often that's like the most impactful way. More so than like someone, you know, gnashing their teeth and writhing on the ground in anguish. I mean, Charlton Heston would probably disagree with me, but that's where I'm at. All right, let's talk about climaxes real quick. I felt like a lot of the climaxes in this series sort of came out of left field, didn't have a lot of build-up, and just didn't have sufficient stakes. Kind of felt like they just happened because we need a climax, so make this thing happen. And then nothing bad actually happens, which I felt like was a theme for the series. Like, just not enough bad things happened. There were lots of opportunities for casualties that I feel like were missed opportunities. Not that I want characters to die, but I think it's important for the reader to feel unsafe and to feel like the author is willing to drop people, so no one is safe and we really don't know where this is going. Spoiler alert, I'm just gonna do a blanket spoiler alert right here. Seth, for example, he's the perfect casualty. He's the classic first man down, happy-go-lucky kid that everyone loves. You can't help loving him, but he's not so important that you can't kill him off. I was so ready for this kid to die, and like, he made it, which is good, but also like, at the end of the third book, there's a moment where we get news a beloved character is mortally wounded. I was so pumped about it. Like, yes, fallout, some consequences, like things are getting real. But then it was sort of undermined. By the time Bella gets to the site, he's already been taken somewhere else and we're told like, oh, he's recovering, like it's fine. So you had this like, yes, like things are really happening. Oh wait, no, everything's okay, so don't worry about it. That kept happening. Every climax just ended up feeling anticlimactic. It was a reminder that a climax isn't just something that comes and T-bones you at the 80% mark. Like, what makes it a climax is that the story builds toward it. It's like this inevitable thing that you know is coming and you have to make it through to get to the end. So it made me think critically about like, okay, have I done this? Have I just thrown in a big event at the end for the sake of having a climax? Or do my climaxes happen organically? Really valuable for me to like critically think about that. So thank you to the Twilight series for getting those wheels turning. Guys, I could keep going. I have so many thoughts. Setting aside my storyteller brain for a second and just putting on my reader hat, can we talk about imprinting for a second? And this is a major spoiler moment, so if you don't know the story, don't listen to this part. I was very unsatisfied with the way Jacob's character was left. How am I supposed to be happy for him when his happiness was like determined for him? Like, he didn't choose this. I also felt like it really undermined what came before. Like, so did Jacob ever love Bella? Did Bella ever actually love Jacob? Or is it like all this weird wrapped up in the imprinting Renesmee thing? Like, I don't know. I don't know. In my heart of hearts, and I know that this is a trope that's been used, but I love it, I think it would have been great if Jacob died, saving Edward from something, sacrificing himself heroically, because then he'd be like this sacred memory in Bella's heart, and he'd have to be somewhat sacred to Edward too, so that way Edward would never be able to get away from Bella's feelings for Jacob, and I just think that would be the best vengeance, but that is just me. Normally I'm not for love triangles, they drive me crazy. But this one I was like taking notes. I think it worked because there was never any doubt as to which one Bella would choose. The issue was the more sort of gritty and realistic issue of like, I still care about this other person, and like, how do I deal with the fact that I'm hurting him? So I thought that was actually relatable and like meaningful. Also, they're pretty safe books, honestly. I was expecting them to be a little edgier just because the movies take things a little further, but I mean, there's nothing but kissing really until after they're married. Arguably too much kissing, I would say, but that's my opinion. But the emphasis on like being married first was like an unexpected surprise. Even after they're married, everything is very non-explicit. I was pretty surprised by the places, the unexpected places where like traditional values would crop up, some biblical references I wasn't expecting. So that was kind of cool to see like how the series stacks up to maybe what's being put out there now. And it was like, wow, like it's pretty safe by comparison. So would I read the books again? Probably not, but I can definitely see myself watching the movies again, so there's that. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and that I didn't hurt any Twihards' feelings too much, and as always, do not forget to spend some time in the clouds today.